Hi everyone, welcome to Adobe Live. Today we have James Tran talking to us all about making cinemagraphs, looping GIFs, all in Lightroom and After Effects. Enjoy! Hey everyone, welcome to Adobe Live this week. My name's Liv and I'll be the host. Today we have James Tran with us. Welcome.
Hello.
If you're just joining us, feel free to jump in the chat. We've already got some people there who are eager to get in. Hey Rebecca, hey John. If you want to join the chat, you can just log in with your Adobe ID. If you haven't got one, it's super easy to make. You can do it just, I think it's in the top of the browser there. You can click on the red button. There should be one there. Cool. So today we are looking at working in After Effects, which is super exciting. And James is going to take us through some of his work, some of the stuff that he does. We're going to learn about his process, which I'm super excited about as well. So maybe if we just want to get started, do you want to maybe take us through a little bit about who you are, what your background is, how did you get here?
Yep. Hey, so my name is James. I'm a motion designer based in Sydney, but motion designer / graphics designer. I've been doing motion design since when I graduated university, so since 2012. And I've started in advertising. I went to broadcast, and now I'm just freelancing and just doing whatever.
Cool.
Mostly in television. Yeah.
Yep. Any shows that people would know, perhaps?
So it's mostly science and kids shows. So unless you've got kids, maybe you'll know it. There's this one called Wow, That's Amazing. So it's on the ABC right now.
And are you doing the titles or the bits in between through the show?
So a bit of everything. I touched a bit of the titles, a bit of the graphic segments.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah,
nice. Cool. And so you went to uni, and so you're doing that sort of stuff now.
Yeah.
What sort of equipment do you use day to day?
For animation or?
Animation. I know we're going to look a little bit about bringing photography into After Effects, so it'd be great to sort of hear about some of the tools that you're using for that side of things too.
Okay. So for animation, I mainly use After Effects and a bit of Cinema 4D, which does come, a light version does come with After Effects.
Yeah, cool.
And when it comes to cinemagraphs, I've always used a camera plus a tripod, again, like a computer. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And so what sort of camera do you have?
So I currently use an A7R3, but you can pretty much use any camera to make cinemagraphs.
Are you the type of person that has lots of lenses and you change a lot, or you have a kind of go-to one lens?
So I started with lots of lenses, but now I find that I try to minimize how much lenses I carry. So I usually just stick with a 35mm lens.
Yeah, versatile.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Maybe do you want to show us a little bit of your work that you've done just on Instagram, because you kind of primarily use Instagram, right?
A
lot of the time. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe do you want to jump on there and we can have a look at some of your just posts recently?
Sure.
People can then follow you as well.
Maybe it's best if you just, I don't know, what are you interested in? So, you want me just to click through them?
Let's just have a look. Let's take us through some of them, have a look at what they do.
Yeah.
So you kind of use this sort of cinematograph kind of technique in a lot of your work. Do you want to maybe break that down a little bit for people and talk about what that is?
So cinemagraphs is sort of it's sort of a photograph with a bit of a moving element, and that's what it basically is. But there's a few rules to cinemagraphs. So the frame should not move, so it should be set down and locked down. So it's you can see it forever and forever like a photograph, because you can view a photograph and it will never change. Same thing with cinemagraph, because if it's a video and doesn't loop, then it sort of breaks the illusion of a cinemagraph.
Yeah. And so you've got this one here, which has got sort of fish going through the background.
So they're supposed to be rockets.
Oh, rockets! Sorry, it's from a distance. I can't see them.
Yeah. They're supposed to be rockets. So this is just some of the stuff I do. So I try to make my portraiture cinemagraphs, and that's how I want to sort of make myself different to other portrait photographers, is to add that little bit of moving element, a bit of that wow factor.
It's quite engaging because you kind of get a sense of almost what the atmosphere was like and what the experience was like there, rather than just a single shot in the moment.
Yeah.
Do you have to kind of capture any footage as you're doing these things, or do you kind of all do this in post?
So there's a few ways. All of them require post, but sometimes I like to record the footage, but that's not always like possible. So then sometimes I just work from my photograph. But if you're going to use footage, the movement is more natural, so it's best if you do use footage, but it's sometimes hard.
Also good if you don't really necessarily always need it. Yeah. So maybe, do you want to show us a couple of other ones that you've got there? Maybe your favourites?
My favourites?
If it's possible to choose like a favourite child.
I kind of like this one. I always like to play with like really creepy stuff, but make it very beautiful at the same time.
Yeah,
so
wow.
This is sort of creepy.
It's a really subtle effect, right? Like, but it kind of adds to the photo because sometimes you don't even notice it to start with.
Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's like over the top. I try to keep it subtle because that's where the magic is. Yeah. I kind of like this one.
Oh, nice.
So for me, like a good cinematograph has to start off with a good photo. If the photo is bad to begin with, it's not gonna work.
Yeah, you might be get distracted by sort of like a bad composition.
Yeah.
Yeah, more than anything. Do you kind of have like a favourite place to shoot in Sydney? What's your kind of go-to in terms of that process?
So I try to go to places that have like a lot of nature in it, because nature just naturally, when it flows in the winds, it looks like it's looping. So anywhere with nature, maybe sea, water, the Blue Mountains, they're all good.
Yeah, nice. Cool. All right, well, getting some people in the chat who are joining us now. If you're just coming in, we've got James here who's going to take us through a little bit of his work around, I guess, looking at cinemagraphs and kind of looping things in After Effects and working with photography there. So thanks for joining us. I've got a question here from Scott. It says, what drives your creative ideas? And do you have a camera with you at all times, or do you just capture things as you see them?
Yeah, I'm one of those people who carry my camera like wherever I go. People know me as like the guy with the camera.
The camera guy.
For me, I just want to get ideas from my head to like the image. So it's a constant process, and the more I work on it, the more better I can get the ideas out of my head. How
do you get them out of your head?
So you know what you want, but you don't know how to get there. And you just got to keep on working, just keep making. You'll get better and better over time until you can sort of build that muscle so you can actually make whatever you want in your head.
It's good advice, I think, because like especially if you're like starting out in photography or After Effects, either or both, it's sort of hard to know where to start sometimes. But I think the more you just get into that habit of doing and always having something ready to go, like you can kind of develop, like you said, your muscle memory, so it gets easier and quicker as you go. Cool. All right. Well, how about we jump into what you're going to take us through today?
Yeah.
Do you want to start by maybe like going to the image that you had? I think it was on Instagram, so we can get a bit of a preview of it.
So today we're going to just try and make like your neon light photos like pop a bit with a bit of movement. I'm doing neon lights because Vivid is currently on at the moment. I feel like it's perfect for people just to sort of create better content with their Vivid photos.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I have heaps of Vivid photos and they just sit there and I don't know what to do with them. And usually, I think this is probably giving you a bit of a preview, but you're going to show us how we can actually use them, because mine always turn up a bit like dark and muddy, and I'm always a bit disappointed because you're kind of there in the moment and it's like really lovely and beautiful, but how do you even get that? So this is super exciting for me because I'm going to take these and use them later. These techniques.
Okay.
Cool. All right, well, why don't jump in?
Okay, so we're just going to start off with editing the photo. So I'm going to jump into Lightroom. I use Lightroom to edit my colors when it comes to photography. So first we're just going to do basic adjustments just to get the image looking right and normal to the eyes. So I always like to start off with just color correction. So we're not grading yet, we're just correcting colors so it looks as natural as possible. So usually I just jump into the basic panel, bring up the exposure. I usually like less highlights, more shadows. Actually, I usually always crop first, so you've got to crop to wherever you're going to post. So for this, it's going to be Instagram, which is 4:5, which is the standard. Just going to pull this down and rotate it a bit. I usually like to bring my saturation down a bit, just to make it a bit more matte.
Do you tend to shoot raw or?
Like always shoot raw and underexposed, because it's easier to sort of bring back the highlights than to recover them if they're blown out. So,
yeah. Often if it's like way too bright, there's no way to bring it back from the dead.
Like even this photo, it just starts off really, really dark, and I just bring it back up like really easily in RAW.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a bit bright. We can make it darker. I always jump into profile lens corrections and enable profile corrections. So every single lens you shoot with will have a bit of distortion, and by enabling profile corrections, it sort of automatically fixes the distortion. And just quickly have a look.
So you're adjusting the temperature there. Are you what sort of temperature are you looking on like a photo like this?
Usually you try to get the skin tones like as natural as possible. So if you're going to go red, it's going to be too warm. If you're going to go cool, it's going to be too dark. So I always aim for like the correct light for the skin tone.
So that's a kind of good marker to use when you're trying to, I guess, find what that right temperature is.
Yes, good skin tones, or if there's whites in the image, but this image has no whites because all the neon lights are like different colored. So yeah, usually the whites or the skin tones. And yeah, I think this is a good starting point.
We had a question which was around how many photos do you take to get like that right shot?
I take heaps, so I usually put mine on burst mode, and I usually get like the subject to sort of change the pose every time I click. So heaps. Heaps.
Do you have like heaps of hard drives just stacked up at home?
Yeah, heaps. Terabytes worth.
Terabytes,
Yeah. Okay. So after you feel like it's all right for the correction, you can just play around the colors. I can't say there's like a specific way to go through this. It's more of a play, and that's the fun of it. Fun of the creativity is just playing around the colors.
And this is looking at color grading at this point?
Yeah, color grading. So color grading, you pretty much just set the tones to what you like them, and the hues and saturations. With this photo, it's already strong. I don't feel like I can add much to it, much of my own character. So, but I'm just still just gonna have a play and see what I can do. So I'm just gonna see what these picks. So I'm using this color picker tool, which changes the color based on where you pick it on the image. So if you're going to go to the blues, it will change the blues. And if you're going to go to the reds, it will change the reds and magentas. I find it just much funner and more intuitive using the color picker tool.
Yeah. Festus was wondering if you used a wide angle lens for this one.
So I used a 35mm. I can't see the metadata. It's usually here. But I usually shoot 35, so I'm assuming this is 35.
Yeah. Cool.
Actually, where is the metadata? No, this is a wide angle lens, actually.
Oh, there you go.
Data here is
good eye,
wide angle.
Festus.
Yeah. Okay. And yeah, just play around the HSL, saturation, luminance.
We were talking a bit about this earlier, but you were saying like you often kind of look to grade it with maybe some tones that make it a little bit more like unique to your style.
Yeah. So with photography, I reckon the color of the photos is pretty important to like your own unique voice and aesthetic. Yeah.
How do you sort of decide what that is? Is that just a personal preference?
Yeah, again, I'd say just go through a lot of photos, edit, and then you sort of pick up what you like, what you don't like, and what you want in your photos. So it's just a matter of doing heaps, and then you'll develop it. I get this question asked a lot, and yeah, it's just a matter of workload.
Yeah. I think you were saying before that you kind of often tend towards like a green or like a cyan sort of.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
When it comes to split toning, so I'll show you split toning. I'm notorious for just doing too much green cyans in my highlights.
I think that comes down to as well, like just what you like, and what you kind of keep coming back to, and you just find that like, it just happens that most of my photos end up having this hue. I think that's sort of ends up being your theme. Yeah.
So let's go and play with this. So you hold down Alt and you just drag through the highlights just to sort of see it at 100%. And see what you like. See, for me, I'm already naturally gravitating towards the greens and blues. Just a bit. Play with the shadows.
So when it says split toning, what does that actually mean? Like, what's it doing there?
So it's separating the highlights and the shadows, and then what you get to do is add like a slight hue to either the highlights or a slight hue to the shadows, and it sort of balances between the two.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
The brightest and the darkest.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. So I usually sharpen here as well. Usually I just zoom into 100% and just see what it's affecting.
Mm-hmm.
So with sharpening, you want to balance the sharp edges, but once you introduce sharp edges, it also creates noise. So you want to find that balance between sharpness and noise.
Mm-hmm.
So just have a look. So in radius, you just want to make it big enough just so it affects the edges. Same with detail, and same with masking. And yeah.
Because it's often hard when you take photos at night, right? When you often do get quite a bit of noise, or you can get that sort of stuff. So does the sharpening help reduce that and kind of allow you to adjust it?
Sharpening does not really help with noise.
Right.
So there is noise reduction. And that should help with noise.
Imagine also the quality of the lens helps with that sort of thing too.
So you can play with the noise reduction, but this does the opposite effect of sharpening, which makes everything more blurrier. But
sort of softer, yeah.
Yeah. I'm just going to do that like that. Whoops. And you can also play around with calibration. I don't know how to explain it, but it does dramatically change the mood of your images. I'm just going to slightly change it up.
If you're like creating, say, like a series of these photos, how do you make sure that all of the settings are sort of similar between each of them?
Yeah, so usually when you're happy with one photo, you can sort of create your own preset.
Okay, yeah.
So with presets, you just press this plus button here and then create preset.
Yeah.
And just tick all the settings that you want copied over to another photo. So they have all these options. Once you create it, I'm just going to call this neon. Then you should have your own preset, and then you can just apply it to other photos. I don't have any other photos here to show you, but that's how you create a preset.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting. I sometimes find that if I'm doing a couple in a row and I want it to feel like a little mini series, it's hard to remember sort of what adjustments I made where or that sort of stuff. Yeah. Cool.
Okay. So I'm pretty happy with this right now. So I'm just going to export it into the folder.
Are there certain things you're looking for in that image that kind of tell you that it's ready to go? Like, what kind of gives you a sense that you're happy with it?
I'd say just edit till you're happy with it. I'll look at the brightness, but because we're going to edit this, I know it's going to still change again.
Yeah.
So, but I just usually look for something that just looks good to your eye.
The balance,
yeah.
Okay, cool.
Okay. And that's been exported. So the next part is we're going to jump into After Effects, and we're going to introduce the neon lights glowing.
Cool.
So After Effects is a pretty scary program if you're new to it, so I'm just going to go through it slowly.
Perfect.
Feel free to ask any questions.
I will.
Yeah.
You too as well. People in the chat, ask questions.
So we're just going to create a new composition. Again, Instagram settings, 1350, 1080. I think 30 FPS is probably optimal for Instagram. Just 10 seconds. And I'm going to call this comp loop. So we're going to make a loop. So I'm just going to drag our photo in to this one and bring it into the composition. So a composition is sort of just like a fresh PSD.
Yep.
Yeah, just adding whatever. Yeah. Oops. I'm going to reset this to standard so you guys can follow along. So if you're following along, this is how your After Effects should look like. So what we want to do with this is sort of separate the foreground from the background and the middle ground. So the foreground is going to be the subject, the background is going to be the wall, and the middle ground is going to be every single glow layer there is. So to do this, we're just going to duplicate this twice, rename the bottom one background. I'm going to lock it so it doesn't move. So the foreground, so we're going to make the foreground. So with the foreground, we want to cut out the subject. So I do that by using this pen tool or the shortcut O. What we're basically going to do is just go along the edges and just cut her out.
Cool. And would you use like a Wacom for something like this typically?
Yeah, definitely. Using a mouse is just unbearable and it's pretty bad for hands. And Wacom makes it like pleasant, very pleasant.
Yeah, much easier. We had a question around the sort of presets one. Festus was wondering if you can like record an action like you can with Photoshop, or are they the sort of a very similar thing?
You can't record an action, but that's what a preset pretty much is all these settings the action does.
Yeah. So I think to answer that is, it's pretty much the same thing. It's just in the different program. Question from Flynn, who wants to know, how did you learn how to pose people?
I'd have like multiple ways of posing people. Sometimes I'd tell them just to like make like a Renaissance painting and just to get them to weird poses. Sometimes I have the camera on selfie mode and let them pose themselves, because usually they're just happy with how they look.
Right, okay, that's interesting.
If that doesn't work, every time I click, I tell them just to subtly change the pose, so we've got like a wide variety to use from.
Do you work with a lot of different people who kind of are your models? Are they your friends? I guess, how do you find those people to work with? Yeah, so I started off with friends, and once you build confidence, you can start like working with models, and people start just up. Once they see your work, people want to work with you eventually. Yeah. Is it a lot through Instagram that you just chat with them and organise that sort of stuff? Yeah, for me it was mainly through Instagram. Yeah. Go around. So you're not doing it like super detailed here. You're kind of still keeping it a bit rough. It's gonna go rough because it is going on Instagram. It's small and people can't really tell the edges. Yeah. This is like quite similar to, I guess, if you're familiar with drawing paths in Photoshop or Illustrator. You're kind of using the same techniques. You're pulling the Bezier curves and just trying to... I like to think of After Effects as the Photoshop of video. So they do have very similar tools and whatnot, but it's just more better for video in After Effects. Yeah, more compatible. Okay, so she's cut out now, which is cool. Do you actually shoot with a tripod when you're doing these things? So when I shoot video, I would use a tripod. Yeah. But I'm a photographer. I started off as a photographer, so I'm more natural just using handheld. Yeah. And that's how layers separated. So we're going to create a glow layer with a blending style. So we're just going to make sure our layers are named, because that just helps us workflow and color. Okay. So we're going to use blending styles just to create the glow. So blending style is just the way we blend the top layer with the bottom layer. So we're going to use add, which takes the brightest pixels in the image and blends it with the bottom. So add would, if this works, it should make it brighter. Yeah. Really getting that glow now. Yeah. Which is kind of interesting, because like you could have tried to push that in Lightroom, but you saved that for here because you know that's an effect you want to add on. Yeah. Okay. So we're just going to make markers so it's easier to go back and forth. We're going to close up our timelines just to make it more efficient. Is there a reason why you're keeping it to like quite short? Yep, I try to keep my loop short for Instagram, because the longer your video is, the more bigger the file size is. And when they upload a big file size to Instagram, they compress it a lot. So we try to keep it as short as possible, so it minimizes the compression, keeping your video sharp and tapped. Yeah, there's nothing worse when you've kind of gone through the effort of trying to like make something perfect and really beautiful, and it looks amazing on your enormous screen, and then you put it on Instagram and it's like
it's just blurry. And then you hear everyone complain about the compression and whatnot. Yeah. I feel like I've read a lot of comments about compression. So fix it, Instagram. Gonna use keyframes just to sort of animate the light. So keyframes is sort of like setting points for A and B. So in traditional animation, you would have a keyframe for the end point and the back point. So think about a car. You're going to start A and B. You're going to have a keyframe A to keyframe B, and After Effects is automatically going to interpolate the time between the two. So it's hard to explain, but it's easier to show. So just for fun, we're going to animate her going from A to B. So if this is A, we're going to put a keyframe for A. And at 1 second, we're going to go to B. And this should automatically make her go from A to B. But
Looks so natural.
but we don't want to animate the position here. We want to animate the glow layer, and we want to turn it on and off. So we're going to so A will be 0 and B will be on, which is 100%. So it's going to work with the opacity. So let's just delete this. So you open up the opacity option with T. We're going to go to 1% and set it at 100%. And then we're going to go to the beginning and set it at 0. So we play this back. It should automatically turn on. And what we want to do at the end is make it turn back off. So we're going to go set a keyframe right before it ends, and at the very ending, we're going to go to 0%. So now it should automatically have like a loop that goes on and off the lights.
So like at the end, it's seamless, so it continues to loop.
Yeah, so the end would be exactly the same as the beginning, and that's how the loop is made. Yeah. And yeah, so the next step we're going to do is sort of mask out where we want the glow to happen. So pretty much we want a layer for every single neon light. It might sound tedious, but the more work you put into it, I guess the better the effect is. It's actually not too hard. So to create a mask, back to our pen tool, which is up here. I'm just going to go around this cake here, roughly.
Where did you shoot this?
So this was, I forgot what the show was called, but it's like a candy store show.
Oh, okay.
Sugar Crush. I can't remember what this is called, but this was in Melbourne, and there's one in Sydney as well, on top of Maya.
Ah, cool.
Yeah.
Good to know.
So we play this back. We've got the mask, and only the cake is glowing, but the edges are a bit rough. So to sort of fix that, we're going to change the feathering to 100. And now we should just have one glowing light.
Nice.
And since we already set the keyframes, all we can do is just duplicate the layer and just add a different mask to a different part of the image. So I'm just going to create different masks. We are going to go around the triangle. Again, feather it 100. I'm going to make one for the peach. So we're going to delete the mask again.
How do you find out about like these sorts of places that have these beautiful walls and backdrops and things that you can kind of play with?
So this one in particular was just like a friend recommended it.
Okay,
but it's just either through Instagram, Google, and events.
I'm always jealous when I see people at great places and you're like, how did you find out about that? And
Yeah.
Then you realise everyone else has found out about it and late to the game.
Yeah. So we'll just do this for a couple more stuff. Let's do these lips. So yeah, we should have a few lights going on and off now. And this is like the most basic way to animate these lights. I'm going to show you another way that gives you a bit more control and movement. So what we want to do is sort of animate the light to follow along this arrow here. So to do this, again, we're going to duplicate our layer. We're going to delete all our keyframes and our masks. So let's just delete these. Delete our mask.
Would you go back and rename your layers just so you kind of know which one's applying to what?
Yeah, I usually do.
Yeah.
Always. It's always best to try to keep as organized as possible.
Yeah.
So the arrow, so we want the glow on this arrow to start here and end up here. So we're just going to create a path for the glow. And then we're going to be using an effect called stroke. So stroke is really good. It's the first thing I use when I started After Effects, and it's good for like animating signatures and calligraphy. But here I'm going to use stroke just to animate the light following this arrow. So in effects, we're just going to look for stroke. So we're going to select mask 1, which is automatically selected, and we're going to increase the brush size just so it covers the arrow. But we also want to soften it, like feather it. So to do this, we're just going to go into brush hardness and go to 0. So to get this animated, we're going to put keyframes for the end and start point. So keyframe for the end, we're going to go to the beginning, go to 0%, so it should animate on.
Nice.
And then we want it to animate off. So a keyframe for start, we're going to go to the end to make it come off. So this should go on, then off, yep. And then in paint style, we want it to reveal the glow layer. So we're just going to go reveal original image.
So that's kind of doing the mask kind of effect.
Yeah, mask effect. And what's good about this is that it's also like the other ones where all you need to do, so the keyframes are set and all you need to do is just mask out different parts of the image. So I'm just going to keep doing this for the other neon lights and just build up the image.
How long would you sort of typically spend on something like this?
So they're all different. This one is pretty quick, so this one goes for about like half an hour, but sometimes if I really want to make something really nice, I can spend like up to half a day. Yeah, just experimenting. So we're going to delete our mask. I'm just going to mask out like other parts. Oops. Select a layer. We follow this. Just because our keyframes are already set, these will just automatically follow along. It's just a matter of duplicating, repeating the mask, and changing it up.
Would you go through and get like super detailed on things like the like sprinkles in the background, or because it depends?
Yeah, it depends. For this one, I wouldn't, because I think it'll add like that much difference. So I'll just go for like a wide mask. So we'll duplicate this again, delete the mask, and just make it go this way.
Do people sort of come to you after you put something up like this on Instagram and ask you to do a similar effect on something that they've shot, or like, you know, or even just work together to try and do it?
All the time.
Yeah, yep.
all the time. I've always get asked questions on how to do it as well.
Yeah.
Even though there's a lot of tutorials on Instagram already.
Yeah. Do you have things that are like your kind of trade secret, or
no?
you're usually
I'm
pretty happy
to share and trying to teach the community.
It's good.
Yeah. So we're just going to do this lollipop. Oops.
So simple once you've kind of set everything up to start with the keyframes. So like it means you can just apply it to everything else rather than have to set them again and then make sure they're in the right spot, because I've definitely done that and spent way too much time having to do that.
So now it's just a matter of masking out stuff because everything's already set. So yeah, that's the lollipop. Let's do this stick. Oops.
Would you go through and sort of like stagger any of the lights?
Yeah, we'll do that at the end.
Okay,
So
Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself there.
Oops. Just gonna go around these love hearts. This is just a very lazy way to do them.
I suppose, once you sort of, it happens in the space of 6 seconds, that sort of detail isn't like that noticeable. You can kind of be a little bit rough with it.
So we'll just play this back just to see how it's looking. I'm going to do this cherry one as well.
Mm-hmm.
Just going to make a basic one for it.
Would you be able to put like a sort of flicker effect on some of them individually, or?
Yeah, so white flickering is just like more keyframes. So
Okay. Yeah.
it's just because right now we have it going on and off slowly, but if you want it to flicker, you just add more keyframes to make it go on and off faster. So we'll just try it on with this cherry one.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got our keyframes here, and we just want to bring them really, really tight together. I'm just going to duplicate it, and then duplicate it again. So now these should flicker, but it's a bit sort of crazy. That works.
Yeah. I guess you kind of want to get a bit of that natural effect
Yeah, so
on the flicker,
yeah.
so it's not, doesn't feel like it's too fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll just spread these out a bit.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very cool. Are you always looking to kind of put this on Instagram, or what sort of other outputs do you have, or places you'd put this?
So for these ones, I usually put them on Instagram, but the skills I teach you in making these work in like advertising. They work on like anything, banners. I've actually learnt my techniques through working in broadcast. So when you watch the news, like on either 9 or 7, the screens, they're always looping, and that's sort of how I developed this technique. It's sort of they always had to loop, and I just was bringing my profession to like my hobby, which is photography, and I'm just marrying those two together.
That's super interesting. So you mean like when you have a presenter and they've got the big kind of
big screens on the back,
Right.
It's always looping. Like people don't notice this stuff, but
it's super subtle. I've actually never really noticed.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
And yeah. Oops. Let's just see how it goes.
Festus was saying that he's a technique around getting people to loosen up, and they sort of ask like, hey, great boots, where did you get them? And they kind of get a bit more familiar with that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Do you have any techniques that you use to get people to feel a bit more comfortable? Because I mean, I know I've worked with people on shoots, and sometimes they're just like, oh, I'm really, really...
You should just have a conversation with them. It's pretty good. Try to get to know them better and to see why they're doing it, and that usually helps.
Yeah. Cool.
And yeah, I can keep going. I'm pretty happy with this right now, but if you want, you just can keep going. So the next part we want to do, like you said just before, because everything is happening at the same time, it's kind of monotonous, so we want to stagger each frame. So we're just going to do this by selecting, we're going to just do it manually. There is plugins out there that automatically does it, but we're just going to stagger each one.
So that's essentially dragging the time over.
Yeah. So they all start at different times.
Yeah.
Okay. But now this breaks the loops because now it ends. So the way we fix this is sort of, we're going to split the layer of where it breaks. So Control-Shift-D would kind of split it. And we're going to bring it back to the beginning. So back bracket will bring them back to the beginning.
Oh, wow.
Now they should loop and start at different times.
That's such a good tip. I have always done this very manually.
And yeah, now we've enhanced our photo with glowing neons. So to further sell this effect, we want to see the reflections of the neons on the ground. This sort of adds a bit more magic. So to do this, I'm just gonna create another comp. I'm gonna call it master. actually.
Just a question from Scott, who was just curious about what sort of scenarios do you think are good for using this technique when it comes to like black and white imagery?
So I think that it changes. So black
Yeah.
and white photography imagery is just the same color. Yeah.
Okay. So just you could apply the same.
Same
Techniques,
technique with
yeah.
black and white. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you shoot much in black and white?
I won't say I shoot much in black and white. Black and white is just like an editing technique where you just take out the saturations or the color in your photo.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to get the reflections on the ground, we're gonna need to cut out the feet again because it does cover the ground. I do this by just copying the foreground, put it into the new comp, and now it's already cut out. We're gonna duplicate the loop. We're gonna flip the composition, so transform, flip vertical. We're gonna bring it back down, and we're gonna create a mask just above her feet, so we don't see the ground again. And then we're just gonna call this reflection. Then we're gonna change the opacity, just so it looks like a reflection. And to me, that already looks good, but we also want to add a bit of perspective. So we're gonna make it a 3D layer, which is this cube here, and you just want to turn that 3D on. Change the X position so it slightly fits better. I'm gonna put this back up and just drag it out. And because reflections aren't usually like perfect, we're gonna add a bit of Gaussian blur.
Okay.
Just to, again, further sell the look. So Gaussian, and let's just make it very subtle. 5.
I love how much it's just like all this is like layers of just attention to detail. Like you could have left the reflection as it is, but I sort of love that you can kind of keep building it, and when you think you can keep pushing it even further, just so that when you look at it, it's really, really good.
Yep. So now the ground should reflect as well. Yep. If it's not too obvious, you can also make it brighter. And yeah, they reflect. Okay, cool.
Wow.
And the model is slightly lost, so we can also easily just do color grading in After Effects. It's just the same as Photoshop, so we just want to make it a bit brighter with curves.
Are you using a plugin for when you just brought that up, or is that?
All right, yeah, that's So I don't know why After Effects doesn't have it yet, but every other program seems to have like a really shortcut to access the effects.
Yeah.
So Control Space. This is a plugin. And
Sort of handy when you know exactly what you're after, as opposed to digging through lots of panels of effects and everything like that.
Just less clicks.
Yeah.
And once you're happy with that, I usually like to add like my own music track to it. Because it just adds more narrative to the frame, more storytelling, more of a mood. And for me, it's 50% of the actual image is the audio. So
Right, cool.
So I've already found a track for this, and we're just going to drag it into the timeline. So the audio is never the exact same time as my loop. So the way I fix that is to sort of time the loop to the audio, and I do that by sort of just cutting these at the end and then pre-comping it.
Do you want to, maybe could you just describe what pre-comping is?
Pre-comping, the way I like to work with pre-comping is think of it like Photoshop folders, where you just add as many elements as you want into the folder. And the folder is on its own layer, so you're pretty much just adding elements into your pre-comps.
And then you can affect that pre-comp.
The whole pre-comp.
And put something.
Yeah.
So it kind of gives you a bit more range of things.
So you're just grouping elements together, sort of just like a folder.
Yeah.
And I'm going to change the time of the pre-comp and match it with the audio. So the audio here is 612. So I'm just going to get a bit slower and match it. Go to the end. Whoops. And this should play black.
We had a question from Festus who was wondering if there's ways you can make your own keyboard shortcuts like you can in Photoshop.
Yeah, you can in After Effects. So there is an edit, keyboard shortcuts.
Easy.
And then, yeah, you can just assign your own shortcuts here with your own letters. I like how it's all laid out just so you can see what's where.
It's a good kind of like place to remind yourself of what the shortcuts are.
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah. Okay.
I sometimes watch tutorials and people just constantly like going around. You're like, but wait, what did you do? What was that shortcut?
Yeah. And this is pretty much it.
Nice.
There's a bit of a flick. That's because I left business, so I'm just going to make that shorter.
Noticed that. Good eye.
Whoops.
I noticed in your other one on Instagram, you kind of had some little almost like glows on certain elements and stuff. Would you kind of put that in as well?
Yeah, I would. The ones on my Instagram is a plugin, which I don't have on this computer.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So it's Starglow, but you can sort of fake it. I'm not too sure how to fake it here.
Let's put you on the spot.
We'll just try, yeah.
Let's experiment. Let's see.
All right. I think it's a directional blur. And then we're going to make this bigger, but we just want to affect the highlights, right? So we're going to go back to add.
So this is using those blending modes again.
Yeah, blending modes.
Yeah,
so
very versatile.
This is just native ones. And it does add a bit of streaking.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can make the streak smaller. Maybe. So it adds a flare, but it's not the exact same.
Not quite the same, yeah. Because your one, I think it was really nice. You have it's super clean and crisp on. So now it's just little points that are coming up. Yeah. Cool. On the audio, I think it'd be really interesting to know what where you go to find those tracks and what you're looking for.
So I just usually use stock. What I use a lot is Looperman. So Looperman is just a website for DJs, and they like to share their samples and loops with each other. And I just take the loops, and it's all royalty free.
Yeah, wow, that's really cool. I wouldn't have thought, but that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, that's sort of mostly what we've got for today. Is there anything else that you wanted to share, or maybe we could go back? Actually, what would be interesting is to go back to your Instagram just to have a look at some of the other ones that you've done.
Yep. First, I also take you through this export setting. So we're just going to go through media.
This is a very crucial part. My apologies. You want to get it out of After Effects for Instagram.
Yeah. Just going to open Media Encoder. Usually takes a while. Okay.
So why do you use something like Media Encoder as opposed to the standard export stuff in After Effects?
I think Adobe has transitioned to Media Encoder, and they prefer creators using Media Encoder to create the stuff. So there's just more options, more varied options, and more presets in Media Encoder than in the After Effects one. Yeah. So I always export a H.264, and I've just used the high bitrate presets. I don't change anything else, and I'll just export it to the folder. And I'll call this, I'll usually name it upload. And yeah.
And then it renders and then ready to go.
Pretty much.
How do you get it onto your phone? It's something I always feel like people have a good hack for.
So most people would use Dropbox and download it off Dropbox, but I use an app where I just wirelessly send it to my phone. Yeah. Sort of like an AirDrop for Android, I guess.
Cool, yeah, that's really smart. I text it to myself. I think that's probably the longest way to do it. Always takes forever.
And this should be it.
Nice. In After Effects, do you ever use? I think I've kind of touched on this in stuff I've done in the past, where you can use code to put a loop into the actual.
I usually use code, so loop in, loop out.
Is that possible to show people just quickly? Is that something that's easy?
Ooh, it's been a while.
Again, I'm putting you on the spot.
You can usually just Google the code.
Yep.
But I think it's loop in, loop out.
Because I remember when I first learned how to kind of loop things, I think at the time, I don't even know if like Instagram had videos at that point. So I think or maybe they did, but I don't know, I think there was always a way, you're trying to find ways to make it loop as like a movie file rather than just as a standard kind of, I guess, looking at, using Instagram to make it loop as opposed to looping on its own.
Yeah. Let me test my knowledge. I don't remember it specifically. So what's no, I don't remember it. But
That's
I
all right.
can Google it.
Yeah, okay. So that's a good tip. Go Google what you can do. But essentially, I think as you can see on the screen there, you can kind of insert a little bit of code, which is super easy to find on Google. And you'll be able to actually get it to loop within After Effects itself once you export it.
Maybe this. Yeah, no, I don't know.
Anyway, cool. Well, maybe just before we finish up, do you want to just have a look? Can we have a look at some of the other ones that you've got on your Instagram? Maybe some other favourites that you've got that people are really loving?
So this one, I'll go through some of the Adobe ones. So this one did pretty well for Adobe.
Wow, that's amazing.
And this is also a really simple one. It's just a video file and it's just looping.
Yeah.
So no keyframes or anything. It's just on repeat.
How did you capture? What was the kind of process behind this one?
So it was on a tripod. It was on the camera, and I shot it at 120 FPS. So this is just normal vapor, but I'm playing it back really, really slowly, so it looks like it's coming out really slowly.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Cool.
That's it.
I always look at those ones with this like vapor or smoke, like a cup of tea that's kind of still steaming.
Yeah.
It just blows my mind. I sort of still can't get my head around it.
Yeah. Let's see what else. I showed you that one. Just let me know if you want to click on anything in particular. So I usually split it up half cinemagraphs, which is my portrait work, and half travel. And yeah.
On the smoke one, actually, how do you mask that out? How do you kind of separate it?
So this one there's no masking at all. It's just smoke, and what it is just looping the video into each other.
Right. Okay.
So this is really, really easy to do. I think I'll show the process here.
Oh, there you go. That's amazing.
Yeah. So this is a timeline. So all it does is just plays back.
Yeah, really cool. So everyone definitely check out James's Instagram because obviously there's heaps there and more tutorials that you can get into, even more so than what we covered today, which is very exciting. There was one other question I think I saw in there, which might be a good one to wrap it up with, but how do you sort of find a balance between, like, I guess, life and photography? Because I imagine they kind of blur a lot. Do you ever think it's work life, or is it going to be...
I think as a creative, you're in the creative field because you absolutely love it. And if you don't have the passion to be in the creative field, like it's going to die out. So I try to make creativity like part of my life.
Hence the taking the camera around all the time.
Yeah, everywhere you go.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, thank you so much for being here. This has been incredibly insightful and I have learnt a lot. I hope everyone else has. The replay for this will be up probably tomorrow. So if you've kind of just come in at the end or if you're coming back for it, that's when you can grab a copy of it. Thank you so much, James.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Come back next week. See ya.